8 genius books that built the West and broke it. The literary genealogy of Western civilization.
Civilization doesn't just produce its great books. In a deeper sense, it's produced by them. A foundational text is never a passive mirror. It's a map a culture draws of itself, and then, fatally, decides to follow. It's a meme. Here's the thing. Only about 10% of people ever shape reality for the rest of us. These books are the maps those 10% handed down. Each one gave the West a new theme to fix the mistakes of the last age. But every single map, in its precision and its blind spots, also encoded the exact route to its own ruin. We're going to trace the protagonist's journey from Achilles' rage all the way to Adam's exile. What you'll see is a repeating pattern. The very virtue that lifts an empire to its peak is also the flaw that condemns it to wander alone in the wilderness. The story of the West isn't a straight march of progress. It's a series of exiles from one garden after another, each book handing the next generation a shiny new key that quietly locks the door behind it. But here's the real pattern. It's not a straight line collapse. It's cyclic. Each exile from one garden becomes the spark for the next resurgence. The West doesn't just break. It mutates, reborn under a fresh theme that corrects the last age's fatal error, only to quietly encode its own. Rage gives way to duty, duty to faith, faith to conscience, and on it goes, each time rising higher, burning brighter before the next fall. Book 1. Homer's Iliad, Archaic/Classical Greece, 8th to 4th century BCE. The society that lived this book was the fragile coalition of Greek city-states. They spoke the same language, worshipped the same gods, but they could never form a lasting union, exactly because of the heroic individualism and zero-sum honor culture that Homer immortalized. Achilles is our guy, semi-divine warrior chasing immortal glory, Kleos. His obstacle, his own destructive pride, Menes. He slowly realizes the heroic code that gives him eternal fame also guarantees he dies young and violently. The flaw baked right into the text, it turns Menes' destructive wrath into the ultimate value. Homer doesn't glorify war, but he makes personal honor, material spoils, and zero-sum status the only game in town. That same brittle, ego-driven politics played out for centuries in the real world. Think Peloponnesian War. Constant fratricide because no one could swallow their pride. Brad Pitt basically played this exact Achilles in Troy. That same destructive pride that dooms everyone around him. How the meme went viral. The poem shows a coalition collapsing from inside ego, not outside threat. It perfectly foreshadowed why classical Greece could never unite and eventually got swallowed by Macedon and then Rome. And just like that, the old garden is locked behind them, but a new one is already being drawn on the map. Rage, goddess, sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles, murderous, doomed, that cost the Achaeans countless losses. And later, any moment might be a man's last. Why should a man cling to life knowing there's no escape from death? Book 2. Virgil's Aeneid, Late Republic/Early Empire, 1st century BCE. Rome had just crawled out of a century of civil war. Augustus needed a myth to justify his new autocratic power. Enter the Aeneid. Aeneas, refugee prince trying to found a new homeland. His real obstacle isn't just enemies, it's having to kill off every personal desire. He loses his wife, dumps Dido, and finally kills Turnus in cold blood. He has to learn to hate the self for the sake of the state. The flaw Virgil encoded? Emotional suppression in service of empire. The poem basically says, to build Rome, you have to bury your humanity. And right after being told to spare Turnus, Aeneas murders him anyway in a fit of private vengeance. That Pax Romana was often just a graveyard piece for anyone who got in the way. Ridley Scott even dropped a direct Aeneid quote into Gladiator 2, that same call to rule, pacify, and crush the proud. How it went viral. The prophecy of empire without end is undercut by the poem's own sadness. The human cost of keeping the machine running foreshadowed the overreach and internal rot that eventually made Rome unsustainable. And just like that, the old garden is locked behind them. But a new one is already being drawn on the map. I sing of arms and the man who suffered much in war until he could found a city and bring his gods to Latium. Do not yield to ill fortune, but go against it with more daring. Roman, remember by your strength to rule earth's peoples, for your arts are to be these, to pacify, to impose the rule of law, to spare the conquered, battle down the proud. Book 3, Augustine's City of God, Late Antiquity / Early Middle Ages, 5th to 10th century CE. Rome had just fallen. The church had to convince a traumatized world that the greatest earthly empire collapsing wasn't a catastrophe. It was actually purification. The protagonist is the pilgrim believer, a soul who belongs to two cities, the doomed earthly city and the eternal heavenly city. The obstacle is earthly attachment and the despair of watching empires crumble. The flaw, that sharp dualism devalued the entire material world, earthly suffering. Whatever, the afterlife is what matters. It created a 1,000-year mindset that slowed secular progress, scientific inquiry, and real political innovation while the church kept a monopoly on truth. How the meme spread? Augustine's split set up a permanent war between Pope and Emperor that weakened both. By saying every earthly kingdom is transient and flawed, the book contained the prophecy of its own medieval synthesis, cracking under corruption and power struggles. Two cities have been formed by two loves, the earthly by the love of self, even to the contempt of God, the heavenly by the love of God, even to the contempt of self. The heavenly city outlasts all earthly empires. It is not made with hands, and it is eternal. Book 4, Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, Italian Renaissance / Late Middle Ages, 1300 to 1550 CE. Italy was a chaotic patchwork of city-states, torn between the dying papacy and rising merchant princes, all while mixing eternal salvation with banking, vendettas, and partisan politics. Dante the Pilgrim, middle-aged guy lost in a dark wood of midlife crisis and political exile. He descends through hell, climbs purgatory, and flies through paradise to finally see God. The obstacle isn't one monster. It's the entire gravitational pull of earthly loyalties, Florence, fame, faction, even romantic love. He has to renounce all of it. The flaw, Dante turns poetic vengeance into divine justice. He literally puts his political enemies, rival theologians, and corrupt popes into hell. The poem says art can be the instrument of final judgment. Renaissance princes learned that lesson perfectly. use beauty as propaganda and as a weapon. Patronage, painting, sculpture, all became tools to damn your rivals and glorify your funders. How the meme went viral. Dante tried to create a perfect, ordered cosmos that held the medieval world together. But he put himself at the center of the universe with the power to judge popes and emperors. That shift from universal authority to individual genius prefigured everything. Italy produced masterpieces, but never a unified Italy. Brilliant egos at war with each other, exactly like the city-states themselves. The poem's desperate hunger for order became the prophecy of the chaos that followed. And just like that, the old garden is locked behind them, but a new one is already being drawn on the map. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. Consider your origin. You were not made to live as brutes, but to follow virtue and knowledge. Love that moves the sun and the other stars. Book 4. A. Martin Luther's 95 Theses and Bible Translations. Reformation, 16th century CE. The individual conscience stands naked before God. The journey is inward, from church mediation to personal faith. Sola fide, sola scriptura. The obstacle is the terrifying weight of divine judgment, plus the raw power of Rome. The flaw? Shattering the unified interpretive community. Once you say scripture alone and conscience alone, you can't put the pieces back together. It freed people from the Pope and handed them over to the local prince's version of God. That atomization gave us beautiful Protestant piety and centuries of sectarian bloodbaths, doctrinal splintering, and the rise of state churches. How it spread. The printing press and vernacular Bible were the ultimate viral tools. They killed the Holy Roman idea forever and fueled the nationalism and secularism that came next. The true treasure of the Church is the most holy gospel of the glory and grace of God. Unless I am convinced by the testimony of the Scriptures or by clear reason, I am bound by the Scriptures I have quoted, and my conscience is captive to the Word of God. I cannot and will not recant anything, since it is neither safe nor right to go against conscience. Book 5. Goethe's Faust, Enlightenment/Napoleonic Era, 1789 to 1815 CE. Revolutionary and Napoleonic France guillotined its king, declared war on the old order, and discovered that limitless human will and rational redesign of the world also create a bottomless appetite for conquest. Faust is the ultimate overreacher. He makes a pact with the devil for total knowledge, total pleasure, total power. The obstacle is the human soul's limits, and the wreckage he leaves behind. Poor Gretchen being the tragic symbol. The flaw? Striving without any moral anchor. Whoever strives with all his might becomes licensed to break every rule. Napoleon lived it. Genius who redrew Europe's map and left millions dead. That whoever strives with all his might idea. It's the same fuel that drives every mad genius movie from Faust remakes to The Prestige. Ambition without limits. How it went viral. The poem says striving itself redeems you. But the destruction in part 1 already warned us that pure ambition without limits burns itself out, just like Napoleon's empire collapsed on the Russian snow, and just like that the old garden is locked behind them. but a new one is already being drawn on the map. Two souls, alas, are dwelling in my breast, and one is striving to forsake its brother. Whoever strives with all his might, that man we can redeem. Book 6, Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species, Victorian/Industrial Era, 1837 to 1901 CE. The British Empire at its peak found in natural selection both a scientific coronation and a quiet horror. The same blind forces that raised them to rule the waves could one day shove them into the fossil record. There's no single hero. The protagonist is life itself, the tangled bank adapting through deep time. The obstacle is the brutal, impersonal struggle for existence. The flaw, people immediately applied it to society, social Darwinism, scientific racism, survival of the fittest as moral law. Colonialism and cutthroat capitalism suddenly looked like nature's plan. How the memes spread. Victorian confidence in inevitable progress hid a deep anxiety. Darwin replaced divine design with blind chance. If evolution is random and ruthless, then empire isn't destiny. It's just today's temporary adaptation before the next extinction event. The seeds of the 20th century's mechanized slaughter were already planted. Thus, from the war of nature, from famine and death, the most exalted object which we are capable of conceiving, namely the production of the higher animals, directly follows. In the course of 2 months, I picked up in my garden 12 kinds of seeds out of the excrement of small birds, and these seemed perfect, and some of them, which I tried, germinated. That most skillful breeder, Sir John Seabright, used to say, with respect to pigeons, that he would produce any given feather in 3 years, but it would take him 6 years to obtain head and beak. Book 7, Franz Kafka's The Trial, Modernist Era, 1914 to 1945 CE. The Austro-Hungarian bureaucracy, and every 20th century successor, perfected rule by endless paperwork. The individual is crushed not by a tyrant, but by invisible procedure. Joseph K. wakes up arrested for nothing. He spends the whole book looking for the law that no one can show him. The obstacle is the system itself, distributed, anonymous, and impossible to fight. The flaw, total internalization of bureaucratic guilt. You don't rebel because you can't even locate the enemy. Modern life reproduces this perfectly. Legal systems, financial systems, algorithmic systems, so complex that people just accept their own powerlessness. How the meme went viral. Kafka doesn't show decline. He shows permanent, absurd decay. We didn't fall from an empire. We entered an endless labyrinth where the center of power is empty. Someone must have been telling lies about Joseph K. For without having done anything wrong, he was arrested one fine morning. Like a dog, he said. It was as if the shame of it must outlive him. Book 8, John Milton's Paradise Lost, Postmodern Era, 1960 to present. Finally, Milton's Paradise Lost, the book that secretly wrote the American and Israeli founding myths. Two nations built on the idea of divine election, city on a hill, promised land restored, now trapped in the postmodern nightmare of knowing their own historical sins while still clinging to the innocence narrative that justifies their existence. The protagonists are Satan, the charismatic rebel, and Adam and Eve, the fallen elect. The journey is exile from the garden into history. The obstacle is the knowledge of good and evil, the realization that the pure national myth was always compromised by the violence of its founding. You've heard that line before, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Keanu Reeves says it straight to Al Pacino's devil in The Devil's Advocate, same energy in Alien Covenant, and John Wick's whole world runs on the flipped version. I have served, I will be of service. Milton's Satan is still whispering in modern cinema. The flaw, Satan's logic, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. The postmodern empire mistakes rebellion for freedom, radical individualism for truth, and we are the exception for divine right. It creates a society where no common story can hold, and then projects its guilt outward. How the meme went viral. The poem ends not with triumph, but with Adam and Eve walking hand in hand, slowly, out of Eden into an uncertain world. That's where we are. Not a dramatic fall, just a quiet, sad wandering away from the founding myth we can no longer believe in, yet can't let go of. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. So dear I love him, that with him all deaths I could endure, without him live no life. The world was all before them where to choose, their place of rest, and providence their guide. They hand in hand with wandering steps and slow, through Eden took their solitary way. Conclusion. So, here's the uncomfortable truth. I'm not saying these books caused the fall in some crude, mechanical cause and effect way. I'm saying the West has been LARPing its own founding myths so hard that reality itself became the afterthought. The map came first. The Iliad wasn't describing Greek honor. It was the hyper-real template Greeks then tried to inhabit. The Aeneid wasn't chronicling Rome. It was the simulation of duty that demanded real humans be erased. By the time we reach Milton, America didn't write the story of Eden. The story of Eden wrote America. And now we're trapped inside the narrative, unable to wake up. We've spent 3,000 years mistaking the map for the territory, then acting shocked when the ground splits exactly where the map showed the fault line. So we keep cycling, rise on the new meme, hit the zenith, watch the embedded flaw drag us into the wilderness, then hand the next generation the key to the next garden. That's the resurgent genius of the West, and its quiet curse. The books aren't windows into the soul of the West. They're the walls of the Labyrinth, and we've been reading them from the inside the entire time. As always, good luck with that.